I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 19th. Tonight we'll be discussing jet stream level winds, surface level pressure, significant wave heights, and all the things that go into making surf in the North Pacific Ocean. Let's get to work. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we actually see a gale developing on the dateline with 20-foot seas aimed at Hawaii and in pretty close proximity and forecast to build, and also aimed at the U.S. West Coast. And yet another gale is forecast behind that as well. And then this other system off Japan, nothing's really expected from that. But it's kind of amazing. This time of year, after we've had multiple southern hemi swells, the North Pacific miraculously decides to wake up. So we'll start off looking at jet stream level winds in the northern hemisphere. These winds help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, and we see it right here, right in the dateline. That is a dip in the jet flowing south. That helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates wind. Wind, if it gets traction on the ocean surface, generates seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. Swell, when it arrives at your beach, turns into surf. All right, so we have a little bit of a trough being fed by 140-knot winds over the, we'll call it the northwestern Gulf of Alaska, and that is forecast to continue into, well, Monday, and maybe even a little bit into Tuesday, and then maybe even a little bit into Wednesday, then starting to fade as the jet lifts north. You see here, it's starting to ridge to the north over the dateline, so that would help create high pressure here, not good for swell production. And then the ridging pattern takes over just pretty much the entire North Pacific by Saturday, maybe a little bit of a trough in the Gulf of Alaska, and falling south just slightly, but probably not enough to generate any significant seas, but who knows? I mean, stranger things have happened. In fact, look at that. There's a pulse of wind energy. It actually looks like it's falling south almost a week out. Never believe a model a week out, but hey, there's some hope. All right, let's take a look down at the surface. Here we are, surface level wind, surface level pressure, and you can see the gale has barely 35 knot winds. So that 35 knots is what it takes to qualify as a gale. So this barely qualifies as a gale, but those winds are supposed to build as we get into Monday morning. Broader area 35 knots, secondary gale building over the north dateline region as well. The primary gale starts fading as again in Monday night, but the secondary gale actually takes over with almost 40-knot winds in one tiny little area. There we go, solid 40-knot winds by Monday night into Tuesday morning. So more swell generation potential is expected. Then that starts fading out as we get into Wednesday, and the whole system pretty much falls apart. We'll roll this out to, well, we're into Friday. Look at this, we actually see a little fetch here on Saturday. Another small gale forecast for the, we'll call it the Gulf of Alaska, but actually this looks better than it did even this morning's run of the model. So hey, who knows? Maybe something will result from that as well. So we'll take it. Not bad for mid-April, not great, but not horrible, considering there's not a whole lot going on in the southern hemisphere in terms of recent swell production. We'll take it. All right, let's go take a look at the wave models. All right, significant wave heights. These are the highest one-third waves in any given area in the North Pacific. 20-foot seas building on the dateline. That was this afternoon, building to 22 feet tonight and into, 25 feet as of Monday morning. That's not too bad. Aimed well at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. And then pretty much holding there. That's good for probably 15-second period swell pushing into Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Secondary gale behind that with 25.8 feet. Oh, to 28 feet, we'll give it. Monday night into 29 feet on Tuesday, so even more swell. And that's actually, let's see, 1, 2, so that's 6, 1,200, maybe 1,500 nautical miles northwest of Hawaii. Not too bad and aimed directly at the island, so another pulse of swell seems likely. This is what, the third or fourth one in a row if all this materializes as forecast? Pretty good late season run of activity. And some energy pushing towards the U.S. West Coast, though pretty, I would call it pretty inconsistent and probably not as directed as Hawaii. Then there's that other gale forecast. Here we go. For the Gulf on Saturday, Sunday. What is that? Barely 20-foot, 19-foot seas. There we go. 20-foot seas theoretically as we get into Sunday over a very small area targeting, we'll say, north of San Francisco, but even down into Central California should see something from that if it materializes. All right, not bad. So let's go take a look in the southern hemisphere. Now we're going back. We're Monday a week ago, a week previous. There was a gale here. There was a strong system that pushed under New Zealand with 50-foot seas. Swell from that is just starting to trickle into California. It's like, I don't know, a foot or two, foot and a half maybe at 19 seconds or 20 seconds. Swell building slightly through the week, but nothing huge expected. This system with, 20, 22, 25-foot seas, yeah, maybe some sideband energy, but of more interest is this gale that developed at the same time under New Zealand, a very small one, mind you, building 38-foot seas, 38-foot seas last Monday night, and then fading from there, tucked right up along New Zealand. Nice little pulse of swell expected to radiate north from a pretty good southwest angle into Hawaii, and maybe dribbles of energy into California, but not a whole lot. Then after that, things got real quiet. So we're just running this out. Little activity in the Tasman Sea relative for Fiji, but so here we are, current time. Now let's go take a look at the forecast. All right, so here we are, current time, not a whole lot going on. Ice line still pretty far to the south. There's 70 south. I mean, we'll get it up to about 62 south or something like that as we get deeper into the wintertime down here, like in the late June, July timeframe. But for right now, pretty far south, plenty of room here if a gale were to push under New Zealand to support storm development or swell production. But yeah, this little tiny system on Thursday, probably not enough to do a whole lot. It's all aimed west to east, nothing aimed off to the northeast. I'm out to Saturday. We're almost a week away, and just literally nothing going on. All the activity there is just, there is no activity. So the northern hemisphere is why we're focused looking there for now. All right, let's move on. All right, we're looking for wind swell and local wind conditions for California, Hawaii. Well, we don't see anything, but here is that gale that will produce not wind swell, but real swell relative to the Hawaiian Islands. Otherwise, here we go, a little bit of building northerly winds as high pressure starts getting a foothold here off California on Monday night. Maybe some little wind swell developing for California. There you go, 20-knot north winds. And trades for the Hawaiian Islands, 15 knots, but not even making it to the islands. Maybe some wind swell from that. We get into Wednesday, same deal. Probably most of this, the gradient, though, is pretty much focused off of Point Conception. So not great for building wind swell. You really, relative to Central California and Northern California, you want to see the fetch more up here, and it's displaced to the south, so we're not thinking a whole lot. Yes, wind swell for the Hawaiian Islands as we get into Thursday, and then the gradient does lift north on Thursday night somewhat. 25-knot north winds or northwest winds along the California coast into Friday. And look at this. This looks like northeast winds relative to the Hawaiian Islands. Let's see what that does. No, it actually holds trades, and except maybe out to Kauai. Okay, anyway, relative to California on Saturday, strong northeast winds, 20 knots, fading out. Then here comes that next gale we saw on the on the wave model charts. Definitely, if it forms, could generate swell. The real issue is we're worried about wind into California if that happens. Trades continue on the Hawaiian Islands on Sunday. Wind kind of backing off for California as we get into Sunday night. So no real clear great wind swell production, which maybe is a good thing if there is actual ground swell in the water. And then a looking for precipitation, a last gasp or grasp at maybe some snow or some rain. We're not really seeing it on the charts, you know. There we go. That's it. One little brief, probably the equivalent of a snow shower for the Central Sierra on Monday night. And this probably maybe a shower, I think, would be the way to interpret that for other areas. And then that's all over. So we get into Tuesday, you see high pressure taking control, a little bit of rain maybe for Cape Mendocino on Wednesday night. And then high pressure pretty firmly in control. We're blasting through this looking. And it seems like the dividing line is Oregon-North California border at 180 hours out. It looks like we'll be moving firmly into a summertime pattern with precip all but over for California and snow for the mountains gone. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden-Julian oscillation and El Nino or La Nina? So we start off with the MJO. We're looking at wind speed and direction across the equatorial Pacific. This is the equator. This is the far east Pacific here. This is the west Pacific here. That's New Guinea. Date line right there. The main area we're looking for, Kelvin wave generation area. This area 5 degrees north and south from the far west Pacific to 170 west, just over the date line. When you get west winds in here or west anomalies, that means weaker than normal trades. You can take that can allow warm water that's typically here to start sloshing to the east, not on the equator, but under the equator, a ball of warm water that eventually, after 3 or 4 months, makes it the whole way itself the whole way across the Pacific, erupting off of Ecuador. And if you get successive Kelvin waves, it can form a broad warm pool here in the East Pacific, and that is the hallmark of El Nino. All right, but today we see, just looking at the arrows, strong trades in control over the entirety of the Pacific Ocean. This would be the opposite of the active phase of the MJO. This would be the inactive phase of the MJO, just eyeballing it. Looking at the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Arrows, we're looking for either a west or east component of the arrows. We're not seeing it, so trades are pretty much normal over here in the east and in the central. Maybe a little bit stronger than normal over the Kelvin wave generation area. Another suggestion that we're in the inactive phase of the MJO. So let's see what the forecast is for the next week. All right, this is the whole planet on one chart. This is 850 millibars zonal wind anomalies. Again, the same sort of thing we were looking at before. It's the east-west component of the wind, right? And what we are looking for is the westerly component, that'd be westerly anomalies, which would look like this. But it's got to be in the Kelvin wave generation area. So that's from about here, 135 east to 170 west, going straight up the chart. So you look in this zone right here, and you see back in, what was that, April or so, we had westerly anomalies associated with active phase of the MJO, but then as we got into about mid-April, it looked like the inactive phase, easterly anomalies, took over, and our forecast to continue for the next week, another sign of the inactive phase of the MJO being in control. Let's look out even further. So another component of the MJO is precipitation. When you're in the active phase, you get more precipitation in the Kelvin wave generation area. Okay, what are we looking at here? The equator goes right through there. That's South America. Central America there. There's Hawaii. New Guinea there. Kelvin wave generation area roughly right in here. And this yellow oranges is positive anomalies, meaning more sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, meaning high pressure, meaning the inactive phase of the MJO. The active phase pushes or helps push energy up into upper levels of the atmosphere, feeding the jet stream and therefore feeding storm production. But as what it appears like is going on is we're in the inactive phase, and we're supposed to continue 5 days out. And if anything, the inactive phase builds 10 days out and pretty strong 15 days out. So that is pretty much an indicator that there is not going to be any good support for storm production for the next 15 days. That doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that there's not real good support for it. And this is per the statistic model. Now the dynamic model here at least paints a little bit better picture, suggesting, yeah, we're in the inactive phase, but about 10 days out, things start fading, and we almost fall into a neutral pattern 2 weeks out. So that's a little bit encouraging. But the two models, 2 weeks out, you can see one says raging inactive phase, the other says dead neutral. Digging a little deeper, look at phase diagram charts. So this is, assume we're trying to find the position and strength of the active phase of the MJO. Wherever the active phase is, the inactive phase is typically on the other side of the planet. So assume you're looking down on the North Pole here, and the active and inactive phase moves from west to east on the equator, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, across the West Pacific, over the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, and back into the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot's where the active phase is, so it's, we'll say, over North Africa, or maybe the far, far west Indian Ocean. So the inactive phase would be on the other side of the chart, so moving into the West Pacific, and that's pretty much what we're seeing on the other charts. Forecast here, 3 different members. 2 say in the active phase basically collapsing. 1 saying getting very strong in the Indian Ocean. Okay, that seems like an outlier. That's per the statistic model. The dynamic model here suggests pretty much some hybrid of that, with the active phase weakly pushing to the maritime continent and then actually backtracking and exceedingly weak. If it's inside the circle here, very weak. So no good support for the active phase of the MJO per these models. 40-day upper level model. This is, we believe, a statistical model, and it runs about a week ahead of what happens at the surface. So the oranges are areas not supportive of precipitation and therefore likely being the inactive phase of the MJO. And it shows pretty much what we're seeing on the other charts. Inactive phase, in control, making its way across the Pacific and into Central America by mid-May, we'll say. Active phase developing in the first week of May, something like that, and not particularly strong, making its way across the Pacific, followed by, again, a pretty strong inactive phase of the MJO in late May, moving towards the Central Pacific at the end of May. So this is probably our window. If anything's going to happen, we'll say early to mid-May, and that's about it. Take a look at the CFS model 4 weeks out. All right, whole planet on one chart again. Kelvin wave generation area from about here going up to 170 west going up the chart. Here's where we are today. The blues suggest easterly anomalies. So this was the active phase of the MJO in mid-April, this solid contour. It's out of the picture now. It's even moved inland, or not inland, but south of California, heading towards the Atlantic. Inactive phase of the MJO developing in the Indian Ocean, forecast to move into the Kelvin wave generation area about a week from now, with pretty solid easterly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area, holding till about mid-May, and then it looks like it'll start to fade out. So no real clear hope for anything here. Then our favorite, the 3-month CFS model. If we don't believe a model going out a week, why would I believe a model going out 3 months? Well, we don't, but it's still fun to look at. All right, so this is whole planet on one chart again. Kelvin wave generation area going right up from there, up to about, up through the middle of the chart. But past performance is on the bottom. The forecast is on the top. We see two good pulses, the active phase of the MJO back in January and February. Since then, we've been in a pretty lackluster pattern right now in the Kelvin wave generation area. Easterly anomalies forecast, and that's pretty much what's happening. Weak westerly anomalies forecast in late April, May sort of time frame. But you kind of notice the westerly anomalies are more west, and by July they become focused over the maritime continent, and you have easterly anomalies building over the, we'll call it the Central Pacific. In fact, let's overlay the MJO here, just get a little sense. Okay, so supposedly we're in a fading active phase, but I think we're in the inactive phase already. Either way, it's supposed to be in control through about middle of May. We know that. Sort of a mix of east and westerly anomalies, mainly more easterly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area. And then a somewhat broader active phase sets up for the month of May with westerly anomalies, but still not very strong. Another weak inactive phase as we get into early June. And the model is just, it's going back and forth. It can't decide whether there's a bunch of little active and inactive phases or big globs of them. But either way, they're all very weak. But this building easterly anomaly pattern is of concern. Let's overlay the low pass filter here. All right. So the solid contour is like a low pressure bias. It's been over the Kelvin wave generation area for 2 years now or something like that. And it is to die as we get into May 13th. This is a high pressure bias that's been over the Indian Ocean. It too is to die at about the same time. Then we go into just this funky nothing sort of a pattern, but still the easterly anomalies suspiciously looking like La Nina. You'd expect though that you'd see maybe this dotted contour showing up here in the Pacific at some point in time if that were the case. The model is not saying that for the moment. All right, let's go take a look in the ocean now. Enough talk of the MJO. We'll start focusing more on El Nino and what's the ocean thinking is going on. Are we in El Nino, La Nina, and what's the trend? All right, so this is data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino or La Nina. So the East Pacific is here, West Pacific is here. These are the anchor lines on the TAO buoys. The X's are the sensors on the anchor lines. They collect data, radio it up or beam it up to a satellite, send it down to, I think it's Maryland. They process it, apply a model to it, and you get a profile of what subsurface ocean temperatures look like. 30 degrees centigrade isotherm, warm water. In the far West Pacific, 29 degree isotherm. It's been hovering around the dateline 180 west. No change today. 28 degree isotherm. It's been pretty solid at 160, but for the past couple of days now, it's starting to make some progress off to the east. So that's kind of interesting. And the 24 degree isotherm pushing into Ecuador. So pretty much no change from last week. Certainly not a La Nina pattern. And very weakly reminiscent of El Nino, but you go look at anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year, and we would expect to see some sort of a Kelvin wave, some broad area of warm water. We're seeing 1, almost 2 degrees centigrade warm anomalies pushing into Ecuador. This is the fading last little remnants of Kelvin wave number 6, the 6th in a series that's been going on for probably 2 years now. Then behind it, we do see warming. We don't see cooling, but we do have this somewhat scary pocket of minus 3 degrees centigrade, cooler than water, normal temperatures. And normally the warm pool goes down to about 150 meters. It's getting shallower and shallower, and it appears that this cool pool is trying to make its way, pushing up to the surface in the East Pacific, but we're not sure. But we're keeping our eyes on that. Another model. Right here, saying basically the exact same thing. Broad warm pool. Now, what this model is showing, it's actually a mixture of modeled and real data, is showing a building warm pool over here, which is good. So maybe, just maybe, somehow we'll get another Kelvin wave out of this thing. Doesn't seem likely, but there's almost some hints of it, at least right here. So hard to tell, but not a strong pattern of any kind indicated. Sea level anomalies. So this is JSON-3 satellite data. There's South America, Central America. There's the equator, dateline right there, New Guinea right there. We're looking for a bump on the ocean surface somewhere in the equatorial Pacific, just 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Everything else is just noise, okay? And we see absolutely nothing. So this is JSON-3 satellite data. Strip out the waves, strip out the wind waves, strip out the tide. If there was warm water at depth, it would be expanding. It would create a bump on the ocean surface. You'd see it here as, like a yellow pool. There was some of that right here, but even that's gone. It means whatever warm water is subsurface, it's not strong, it's not moving quickly, and it's not making much of an impact. Upper ocean heat anomalies. All right, so this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. and the oranges and reds are warmer than normal water. So you can see back a year ago, we had a small stalled Kelvin wave. We had probably the active phase, the MJO, pushed warm water from the Kelvin wave generation area and made it about halfway across the Pacific, and it stalled and died. Another Kelvin wave in the July timeframe did the same thing. Then last fall, a stronger one in September, October made its way across the Pacific, impacting Ecuador in the Christmas timeframe. And then we had another two sort of weak active phases, the MJO, created a Kelvin wave. But this Kelvin wave too, just like these two here, has stalled. We don't think it's going anywhere. Cool water off of Ecuador, and cool water now the whole way just about across the Pacific, down at depth. Not cold, but just, not warm water, was at 0 to half a degree below normal. Now, the one bit of good news is there's little bits of signs of warmer water trying to rebuild in the West Pacific, but this generally looks like a very weak signal of, no strong MJO signal, no strong Kelvin wave signal, nothing to really jumpstart the jet stream, feed energy. It's just kind of a weak energetic pattern in the ocean and in the atmosphere at the moment. That said, let's look at ocean surface temperatures, and something very striking pops out. There's this El Nino-like warm pool building on the equator. This is not a double. It's the two images kind of, it doubles. Anyway, you see Ecuador's there. All right. Warm water over the Galapagos. A good warm pool from, we'll say, 110 west out to 135 west. This is pretty impressive, and kind of working its way up into Central America and down into South America. And there was a cool pool that's persisted off of Peru for a year now. It appears to be in complete collapse. So just looking at the ocean, you go, hey, it almost looks like El Nino. But we know there's no westerly wind bursts going on. We know there's just this last little bit of Kelvin wave. In fact, the last remaining Kelvin wave is right under here, and we think what's happening is it's bleeding to the surface, creating this warm signature, and once it dissipates, it's over. This whole warm pool will probably start collapsing, just basically discharging, and then that cool water that's down at depth of 3 degrees centigrade cool water might start taking over the East Pacific. We're not saying it's going to, but that's a possible scenario. But we'll see. Hard to tell. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. You can clearly see the warming trend from the Galapagos, from Ecuador over the Galapagos on out to, not to the date line, but a pretty good area. But you also see weekly cooling temperatures along Peru. But otherwise, yeah, we have warming, but again, we think it's the discharge of the last Kelvin wave at the surface, and with nothing much behind it, unless some miracle happens here. We're in the inactive phase, so odds are you're not going to get it. You only get Kelvin waves typically during the active phase of the MJO, and we don't see any active phase in the next couple of weeks happening, so this might be the end of it. And then again, the backed off view. Clearly, warm pattern over the equatorial Pacific, encouraging. Cool water off California and Mexico. The other cool pool that was here, completely gone, maybe falling south. Looks encouraging right now, but we think this will be short-lived. Also take a look at the Atlantic. Cooking warm, still too early in the season. Not till you get into the end of May, till we really move into hurricane season. But looks like, when you get this a developing La Nina sort of thing, the energy saps out of the Pacific, and it seems like all the activity moves into the Atlantic. Water temperatures warm up there, and then the hurricane season fires up. So we'll see. But watching the hurricane season this summer here will be a good indicator of what's going to happen in the fall in the Pacific. If we get a bunch of storms, and the current, some of the projections that are out are suggesting increased number of storms and storm days and hurricanes and intensity. So suggesting, again, sort of a fading of the Pacific Basin with the Atlantic Basin taking over for a while. Looking at sea surface temperature index, the Nino 1.2 region. This is the area right up there along Ecuador, the Galapagos, just off of Peru. Half a degree above normal, 0.518, and only for the past 1, 2, 3, 4 days. Other than that, it was neutral. You see, it was bouncing around for late February, March, early April, up to maybe 0.6 of a degree above normal, then fading. This is a noisy area, though. It's really the Nino 3.4 area. This is the area from 120 west out to 170 west on the equator. Temperatures today, 0.639 above normal, and have been holding there pretty much all March and April. You have to be half a degree above normal, so there's the half a degree line for 5 consecutive 3-month overlapping periods. We've just been saying 5 running months. We're not seeing that. That's to declare El Nino. So if you're in mid-March and you finally hit the half a degree mark, you're not going to make it into a El Nino for this winter or this, maybe next year, but I suspect these temperatures are going to be dropping off if the warm pool discharges. So no hope for El Nino in this data. All right, what's going on in the atmosphere? We've talked about the ocean. We've talked about subsurface temperatures, surface temperatures, MJO. But what's going on? Well, does the atmosphere think that something's happening here? So we'll take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index. Difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When pressure is lower over Tahiti, that typically means the active phase of the MJO, and if it's active long enough, that could suggest El Nino. The index goes negative. Today, the index is plus 15.14. Yeah, it was negative a couple of days, but it's the trend over a long period of time. You can see here, yeah, we had a pretty good run of negative numbers into maybe March, and even into early April, but now it's more positive than negative. 30-day average takes the noise out of the numbers, minus 4.5, but we were at minus 7. I mean, look, you can see it's been toggling around. No clear signs of really the active phase of the MJO. I'd want to see this down at minus 10 or something. And then the El Nino indicator is the 90-day average, minus 2.93. No, this needs to be down at minus 14 or something, 10 at least. No sign of El Nino here. If anything, the index is, it's not really rising to positive values. It's just hanging there. Basically neutral, going nowhere, which is better than the alternative. You don't want to see this going positive because then you're in La Nina territory. But the good news is we're not seeing that. All right, so what's the forecast? Sea surface temperatures. That's a good way of monitoring El Nino or La Nina. Warmer than normal temperatures, half a degree for 5 consecutive months is El Nino. This is a forecast. Here's where we are today, April 1st. Temperatures crashing. Here's the neutral 0 degree mark, and temperatures forecast to only go down to 3/4 of a degree below normal, and then down to 1.5 degrees below normal as we get into the fall time frame. So we were looking at some other papers from NOAA, and they were suggesting the CFS model has a bias, okay, and that it's over-exaggerating this crash into La Nina. So their official forecast is no, ENSO neutral. We're going to be just sort of like this as we get into fall and winter. That said, looking at the ocean, looking at things that are going on, I'd say that would be our best possible outcome. I'm not holding out. I'm not completely dismissing the CFS model. And there's 2 other models that are saying pretty much the same thing as this, a strong move towards La Nina. But we're in the spring unpredictability barrier. Okay, we won't be out of that. The models have a real hard time in the March to late May time frame. So we have another month to go before we'll really sort of see how this all sorts out. So my fingers are crossed that this model is in fact wrong, that it's biased, that it's overstating the situation, that we come out with a neutral winter, which would be great. I mean, theoretically, then you'd have Neutral precipitation into California? Maybe. Of course, there's a lot of other variables that play into that. And a normal winter surf pattern? Maybe. This past winter was supposed to be normal, slightly better because temperatures were warmer than normal. And how was our winter surf season? Yeah, I'm holding my nose too. It wasn't that great. We had like 1 month of real surf and the rest of it was pretty meh. And yeah, we have some surf now, but nothing. I mean, we haven't had anything epic in a long time, and I'm suspecting we're not going to see that. But the good news is there's some swell in the water right now. Mixture of southern hemi swells and more on the way. And northern swell, believe it or not, and more on the way. So go get some waves if you can do it safely, if your beaches are open. It's not worth getting a $1,000 ticket or any of the other nonsense you got to go through to get, chest-high surf or shoulder-high surf? I mean, yes, we all are sick of sitting inside. I am too. I would love to go out and get some waves, but only if you can do it safely. Don't put everybody at risk. Don't put your parents, your grandparents at risk by dragging COVID home and getting them sick. It isn't worth it. But if you can do it safely, go enjoy it. Go get some waves. Have a good time. All right. All the data that we've shown tonight is on stormsurf.com. Go check it out. You can follow along daily. We also post forecasts there. Quick casts, long, detailed data, and of course all the models, buoys, everything. Go check it out there. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. You can subscribe, click the bell, and you will get email notifications when we update the forecast. Or just go to the site every week. Pretty much we do this. What else do we have to do? Sunday night, the Sunday night forecast. All right, so that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Be safe, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.